I don't have a graphic for this, but this is an important piece of news. Wilfredo Leon has re-signed with Sir Safety Perugia, and the details of the contract are 3 years and 1.5 million euro per year.
That's a lot.
Boom.
That's a lot for the volleyball world, right? Like that's an all-time contract. Notably, it's kind of around almost kind of in the same ballpark as Paulo Gonu. So it's an absolutely huge contract. And if you're, Cersei, the owner of Perugia, and that club, why wouldn't you? He's the best player in the year
Totally.
in the world. It looks like this year they could be doing some crazy things with the roster that they have. So why not run with it? And especially with everything, all the tumultuousness with all of the other teams around them, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, why not lock down the best player in the world? I mean, they also locked down Kalachi at the same time. So you're, locking down the front of your court, you're locking down your back court, and then they're just going to grow up from there. I think Gianelli signed a couple-year contract as well, too, this summer. So Perugia is looking to be the most dominant team in the world for not only this year, but a few years to come.
Yeah, and you're right about putting Wilfredo Leon's contract in. It's in the ballpark with what we hear Paulo Gon is going to sign for, but you can't argue that he's not worth every penny of this contract, and
Absolutely not.
maybe even a little bit more so. He's the best player in the world by far, and he's proven it time and time again. And you're right. Now that Perugia has surrounded him with at least loosely capable pieces, and in many positions better than that, Perugia's set to do some pretty nasty things in the Italian league and in all Europe this year. So yeah, why not lock him down? The off-season arms race apparently has already begun in earnest, and the first domino to fall is actually staying exactly right where it was with Leon. And there were some goofy rumors swirling surrounding him, like maybe going to Piacenza or something crazy that they could never afford. But it is good to hear that we know exactly where to expect the best player in the world to be, and now all the teams throughout all of Europe and the world can grab at whatever players elsewhere they want. But Wilfredo Leon's staying put.
Now, what I'd really want for this to happen is there to be a trickle down effect. As you said, this is the first domino to fall, and maybe this kind of sets the tone for the other contracts to fall underneath that. Because let's be honest, it's not like anyone is getting anywhere near that. Like he's by far the only player in volleyball getting seven figures in that way. Maybe some people in Asia, but will that trickle down to the other players? And the reality is, I don't think it will. Right? Like I think if anything, it may hinder some other players, and put some other players in a more difficult position. Because let's be honest, the money in volleyball right now isn't there. So as good as it is to see on the one side, it does make me nervous about the other side of things. Is it going to create things that are maybe a little too lopsided as well?
Yeah, that's a great point. Budgets in volleyball have really been squeezed by COVID for obvious reasons, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised that Cersei found the money to promise 4.5 million euro to Leon over the next 3 years. That is great, but you're right that that is not to me a sign of abundant money elsewhere to sign great players. It's a little bit of sign of the opposite, like Everett just said. So that is a little bit of a concern. Message in the chat. So we're live on YouTube on the Volleyball Source channel. If you're listening on the audio forms, tune in on Tuesday nights, almost always at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, to talk with us on the show in the YouTube chat. The YouTube chat says no one wants to take ZSP's money. And that's an interesting point, because the next rumor that we have to bring up is about a certain yeah.
It's not. I mean, it's not necessarily a rumor. It's fact.
It has been reported by Italian media from reputable sources, and I'm still not in a position where I'm comfortable saying these things are confirmed mid-season. It's just so weird to me that Europe does it like this. But
fair enough.
The reports coming out are that Namir Abdelaziz will break his contract with Modena. And
break his contract, or I thought he had an option to go 2 more years, and he declined the option.
As far as I know, what I was reading is that all of Namir, Bruno, Ingapet, and Leal, all four of them who were the big offseason, incoming players for Modena this year, all of them signed 3-year deals through 2024. And for any team to come and get any of them, they would have to pay a 150,000 euro buyout. And it has been reported that that is exactly what Zenit St. Petersburg plans to do. So it is possible that Nimir's stay in Modena will be extremely brief, and that he will be headed to Russia, where I mean, it's a kind of a natural place for a guy of his play style, of his firepower, of his serving, blocking, attacking prowess, of a player who has recently laid claim perhaps to being the best opposite in the world. And I think the only real contender in competition at that position has been playing for Zenit Kazan for the past 10 years, and his name is Maxim Mikhailov. So it would be cool to see those guys do battle over and over again in the domestic competition. I would like to see that. It is a sign of Modena. Not only are they having their on-court issues this year, but perhaps a sign of something even worse in the long term for them. But is what has been reported, is that Nimir and one of several players who signed a pretty lucrative 4-year deal is going to break that contract much shorter than expected, perhaps head to Russia.
I mean, we've already seen Pedrini come out into the press and talk about all of the restrictions that we've seen on spectators and fans in the stands in Italy, right? And we talked about it many times about how much their budget is linked to those ticket sales from Modena.
Right.
Like, it's almost a miracle that they were able to find the money to sign all these players this year. You know, they took a step back last year, let some players go away. Obviously, that led to basically having a team of basically only Christensen and Grebenikov. You got all the defense. You got the first and second touchdown, but just can't finish. This year, they kind of almost go the opposite. They get everyone there, but it just hasn't come together for them. Like, we've seen these bits and pieces of just great play and being one of the top teams, but especially just getting knocked out of the CEV Cup. There's obviously something happening behind the scenes in Modena that people don't know about. Maybe we can send Tommy in another, recon mission to figure some things out. But it's very interesting what's going on, because not only is Nimir rumored to go to ZSP, but now it looks like also Leal and Engapeth are maybe rumored to be signed at Piacenza. Like, it seemed like this team is getting blown apart before it even having a chance to get together.
Yeah, and especially with how rare it is for volleyball to have 3-year deals, where like now we're seeing it with Leon, like the guys from Modena, like we just talked about, have came in and signed for 3 full seasons through 2024, which I like. The fact that that's already being broken apart to some degree, at least in Modena, is concerning for sure. Like that, we're going to learn a lot more about what's going on with that organization this offseason, as I think there will be some very, very significant moves made, not even just with like in terms of their rosters, but it's a little bit of a concern having a step in the right direction of locking down players for longer term deals, and then those deals not being able to be fulfilled. I don't really know what to expect just yet.
No, it's a little bit crazy. I agree with you. I hate how this happens in the middle of the season. Like, we're right in the full of the throw of Champions League, right in the middle of league play. Why is this the window? I mean, I think it happens in soccer too, but those are more so like mid-season transfers where a player moves from one team to another, right? Because the transfer window just closed. It's absolutely insane to me that we do this speculatively, and not even necessarily speculatively for next year, right? Like, just give it some time, let things settle down. Like, it's difficult to watch sometimes, because we're seeing it with Lube and Simone as well, and that Simone might be heading to Piacenza. That's the other big rumor that's going around at the moment.
Yeah, we talked about it a few weeks ago on the show. I can't remember. It was probably when the Pale Egonu to Vakif rumor was getting more and more traction and more legitimate report. We're like, well, if you're already working towards building next year's team and you have no idea how this year's team is going to finish in the late season tournaments that matter, like why aren't you building your team around continuing some success that you might have in meaningful tournaments this year, when those meaningful tournaments haven't even happened yet? It doesn't make sense. It disturbs what the actual volleyball that's going on now, and it breaks apart some continuity that you could possibly build on depending on how your season ends. You're throwing all your eggs in a basket that is too far down the road, when the one you have right in your hands, you don't even know if you have something great in there just yet. The timing confuses me, and unfortunately there is no like governing body oversight to install any regulations, and I don't see the FIVB stepping in and installing anything of the sort. So I think this is just kind of the world we have to live in with volleyball.
Yeah, it's so weird, and it just kind of shows how precarious of a spot volleyball is in general, right? The fact that these long-term contracts aren't happening, and it's majorly because the budgets from year to year for teams are so drastically different. Sponsors drop in and out, and you know what? I would love to see it just kind of settle down a little bit. See some teams invest into younger players, have a bit of a farm system, develop some players. Instead, it's all very scattered and just these 1-2 year little spurts. That's why it's clear that Perugia is trying to set up something similar to what Zenit Kazan had in those heydays where they had Mikhailov and Leon and Anderson. I mean, you got two of the three already there, right? Add Rich Licky to that, like that. There's your boys, and that's your team, right?
Yeah, and I mean we've seen recently that that's a pretty good way to build a program. We saw it with Zaxa. They built that thing over 5+ years. They literally grew Kamil Semenyuk from a little seed of a player when he was a junior, a super fan of Zaxa. They built him into one of the best outside hitters in the world, and they reaped the benefits. They won a Champions League off of that process, and it was fun for all of us to see because sports fans appreciate when it's clear that you have homegrown talent and you've done it the long way, and you've put in the years and the time and the blood and the sweat and all that. So it's a little bit of a different game depending on the league and depending on the franchise, but this is a good segue to the Italian women's